The year is 1453. The greatest city on earth stands on the edge of its last dawn. Constantinople, the queen of cities, the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire, still gleams beneath the sun, but its glory is a reflection of light already fading. Once it sprawled across 14 square kilometers, its mighty Theodosian Walls stretching nearly 20 kilometers from the Sea of Marmara to the Golden Horn. For centuries, 500,000 people filled its markets and forums. Greeks, Armenians, Venetians, Genoese, Persians, Jews, all living within the embrace of marble and empire. Now, perhaps 50,000 remain. The rest are gone to plague, exile, or despair. Church bells ring in empty districts. The harbour smells of rust and salt. The wind sighs through broken arches where mosaics still catch the dawn. If you enjoy these journeys, a like and a subscription mean more than you think. They directly keep this channel alive, and I'd love to hear from you too. Where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Now together we till slip into the journey. At the city's heart rises Hagia Sophia, its dome 30 meters across, higher than any built before. Once it blazed with gold, its mosaics reflecting the sun so brightly that travellers at sea mistook it for a flame. Beneath that dome, emperors were crowned, crusaders wept, and choirs once made the marble tremble. Now the candles burn low. The smoke climbs straight upward, untouched by wind, as if the air itself refuses to breathe. You walk through the sleeping streets before sunrise. The stones underfoot are slick from the night rain. Once, processions marched here, priests with censers, guards with spears, children scattering petals before the emperor's horse. Now the sound of your footsteps echoes between shuttered houses. At the Forum of Constantine, pigeons circle a broken column that once held a bronze statue of the first Christian emperor. Its base is blackened with soot from the fires of a century ago, when the Crusaders of the Fourth Crusade, supposed allies, sacked this city for gold and relics. The wound never healed. You stop by the harbour wall and look out across the Bosphorus. Beyond the faint line of water, smoke curls upward from the Anatolian shore. There, across the strait, lies the new city of Edirne, capital of the rising Ottoman Empire. The people here still call the Sultan's lands the wilderness, but they know the wilderness is moving closer. In the palace of Blakeney, the Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos kneels before an icon, whispering prayers that sound more like farewells. He is 50 years old, the last Roman emperor, descendant of 1,000 years of emperors, now ruling an empire smaller than many provinces. His crown is worn thin, the jewels loosened by generations of war. Each night he climbs the ramparts and walks alone along the walls, gazing west where the moon glints on the Bosphorus. Somewhere beyond that silver line, a new world is rising, a world that no longer remembers him. The empire has outlived everything that once surrounded it. The western kingdoms it once called barbarian now sail great ships and mint new gold. Rome itself has become a word, not a power, but this city, this Constantinople, still stands suspended between past and future, faith and fire. Inside the great palace, the last court of Byzantium gathers. The courtiers whisper about prophecies. They say that an angel will descend from heaven to drive the enemy away. They say that when the city falls, it will rise again at the end of the world. They say too many things, because faith is all they have left. February 1453. The emperor writes to Venice, to Genoa, to Rome. He asks for aid, for ships, for men. The answers come slowly, politely, and without hope. The Venetians are busy protecting their trade routes. The Genoese guard their colony in Galata, directly across the Golden Horn. Even the Pope promises prayers more readily than soldiers. By March, merchants begin to hoard grain. Bread grows thin, salt scarce. The people light candles before the icon of the Virgin in Hagia Sophia and wait for a miracle. At dusk, the city looks almost peaceful. The domes catch the last fire of the sun. The sea glows like beaten bronze. Fishermen draw in their nets along the sea walls. Children chase gulls through the ruins of old forums. Monks move through the streets with lanterns, their voices rising in the Kyrie eleison. Lord, have mercy. You walk the length of the Theodosian Walls, 20 kilometers of layered stone built 1,000 years ago by Emperor Theodosius II. They have turned back Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, and Crusaders. Their towers rise 12 meters high, their moat runs 30 wide. No city in the world has ever survived so much. But when you run your fingers along the mortar, it crumbles into dust. Far below, the Golden Horn lies still. A heavy chain stretches across its mouth, linking the city to Galata, a barrier no fleet has yet crossed. Beyond the chain, the black water gleams. And across that water, on the hills of Asia, small lights begin to appear. At first they look like stars, then slowly they move. Campfires, too many to count. The emperor sees them from the tower of his palace. For a long moment he says nothing, then he turns to his advisers. "They have come," he murmurs. "Let us prepare." The bells of the city ring out, low, uncertain, carried on the wind. In Hagia Sophia, the priests light more candles. On the walls, the guards tighten their cloaks against the cold. Somewhere in the distance, a drum begins to beat, soft, steady, far away. The sound crosses the water like thunder heard in a dream. And in that rhythm, the people of Constantinople hear the echo of prophecy. 1,000 years of empire, and now perhaps 1,000 years of silence. Spring, 1452. Across the Bosphorus, in the city of Edirne, a young ruler begins to draw the map of the world he intends to conquer. His name is Mehmed II, son of Sultan Mehmed II, 20 years old, the 8th ruler of the Ottoman line. He has ruled once before, briefly as a teenager, but was forced aside by his own father. Now, with his father dead, he has returned to the throne determined to finish what no Muslim army before him has done, to take Constantinople, the last fortress of the Eastern Roman Empire. He walks the banks of the Maritsa River at dawn, his cloak brushing frost from the grass. His tutors say he speaks 6 languages: Arabic, Persian, Greek, Latin, Turkish, and Serbian. He reads the Quran and Aristotle in the same breath. He believes that destiny is geometry and conquest is art. That spring he orders the building of a fortress on the European shore of the Bosphorus, Rumeli Hisara, the fortress of the Roman land. It rises directly opposite Anadolu Hisara, built by his great-grandfather a century before. Together they choke the strait between the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara. By August 1452, the work is complete. 3 great towers of stone armed with cannon, their mouths aimed at the passing ships. One Venetian vessel that dares to ignore the new law of the strait is sunk in a single shot, a warning that no ship may now reach Constantinople without the Sultan's will. From that day, the city-sit's fate is sealed. January 1453. In Edirne, the forges burn day and night. The sound of hammering echoes through the valleys. The Hungarian engineer Orban, once employed by the Byzantines but unpaid, now serves the Sultan. He casts the largest cannon the world has ever seen, a bronze monster nearly 8 meters long, its barrel able to hurl a stone ball weighing over 600 kilograms. To move it requires 60 oxen and 200 men. When it fires for the first time, the earth trembles for miles. Windows shatter in Edirne. Mehmed watches silently and then says, "The walls of Constantine have stood 1,000 years. Let them stand 1 month more." March 23rd, 1453. The Ottoman army begins to march west. Contemporary chronicles count between 70,000 and 100,000 men. Turks from Anatolia, Janissaries from the Balkans, Arab artillerymen, Persian engineers, and irregular troops called Bashi Bazouks, wild and fearless. At its heart rides Mehmed himself, wearing light armor of gold-inlaid steel. Behind him follows an endless column of wagons, powder, rations, siege towers and the great cannon dragged by oxen at a mile a day. April 2nd, 1453. The vanguard appears on the hills outside Constantinople. The banners of green and red flutter in the wind, stitched with verses from the Khuristan. Victory belongs to the patient. By April 6th, the main army arrives and begins to encircle the city. The Byzantines count only 7,000 defenders, among them about 2,000 foreign mercenaries, Genoese, Venetian, Catalan, and even a few English archers. Their commander is Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, a Genoese nobleman and veteran of many sieges. Giustiniani takes charge of the land walls, the Theodosian Walls, 20 kilometers of stone and moat, with towers rising more than 12 meters high. The Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, 50 years old, personally commands the reserves. The last emperor of Rome fights not to win but to die well. On April 6th, the first Ottoman guns open fire. The great cannon roars, and its stone ball smashes into the outer wall near the gate of St. Romanus. Dust clouds rise like smoke, bells ring from the churches, and the defenders cross themselves. The bombardment continues day after day. The cannons fire 7 times daily. Each shot tears a wound in the walls that men and women rush to fill with earth, stones, and even broken statues. April 12th. Mehmed orders the Ottoman fleet, more than 400 ships, including light galleys and transports, to seal the city by sea. The Byzantines chain the mouth of the Golden Horn with a massive iron chain, stretched between the city and the Genoese colony of Galata on the northern shore. For now, the harbour remains closed. April 18th. The first direct assault. Under cover of darkness, thousands of Ottoman troops charge the walls near the Mesopotamian sector. The defenders respond with Greek fire, jets of burning oil, hurled from clay pots. The flames crawl across armour and water alike. When dawn comes, the field before the walls is littered with bodies, and the smell of burning flesh hangs heavy in the wind. Mehmed does not waver. He changes tactics. He orders tunnels dug beneath the walls, mining operations meant to collapse the towers from below. But Byzantine counterminers, guided by Italian engineers, dig listening shafts and flood the tunnels with water. For weeks, the war turns into a battle of echoes, men fighting in the dark, picking at the earth, each side hearing the other's breath through the soil. Then comes April 22nd. At dawn, the people of Constantinople wake to an impossible sight: Ottoman ships inside the Golden Horn. Mehmed has achieved the unthinkable. Over a single night, he orders 70 ships dragged overland across the hills of Galata, using wooden tracks greased with animal fat. By morning, his fleet has bypassed the chain and re-entered the water behind the Byzantine defences. Panic sweeps the city. The last safe harbour is lost. The emperor prays in Hagia Sophia, asking God for deliverance, but the silence afterward feels heavier than any answer. May 7th. Another assault. Fierce and desperate, the Janissaries, elite infantry of perhaps 10,000 men, charge the breaches near the gate of Carisius. Giustiniani is wounded, his armour pierced by a fragment of shot. He is carried back to his ship, his men losing heart. Without him, the defence begins to falter. Mehmed watches from a hilltop, calm, calculating. His generals urge another pause, but he refuses. He writes a final letter to Emperor Constantine. "Surrender the city, and your people shall live in peace. Resist, and I will leave not one stone upon another." The Emperor Sip's reply arrives the next morning. "To surrender is to betray all who came before us. We will fight as Romans, and we will die as Romans." For a brief moment, both men understand each other perfectly. They are not enemies now, but twin reflections, one rising, one falling, standing at the hinge of history. That night, the Ottoman camp sleeps under red lanterns. The sky glows with fire from their furnaces, casting the shadows of the guns across the ground. In the city, the bells ring for an all-night vigil. Across the narrow sea, two armies pray to the same god, in different tongues, asking for victory and mercy in the same breath. The siege is not yet won, but everyone knows the old world has already ended. April 7th, 1453. The city wakes to thunder. From dawn until night, the new cannons of the Ottomans fire without rest. Each shot echoes between the hills like the heartbeat of the end. Dust rises from the Theodosian Walls. Fragments of marble crash into the streets below. Inside the city, people flinch at every tremor. The old claim that Constantinople is protected by heaven itself sounds less like faith and more like denial. On the western wall, near the gate of St. Romanus, the defence is led by Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, commander of the Genoese contingent. His men, 2,000 veterans armed with crossbows, hand cannons and pikes, hold the crucial sector. Every dawn he inspects the damage with calm precision, calculating where the next breach will come. The Emperor Constantine XI often rides beside him, in armour patched with older dynasties' emblems. The men cheer him quietly. He is not a king anymore, but a brother among the doomed. Beyond the walls, the Ottoman artillery line stretches for nearly 2 kilometres, 21 massive guns and dozens of smaller pieces, each positioned by the Hungarian engineer Orban. His largest weapon, the basilica, fires once every 2 hours, each shot taking a full crew of 200 to reload. The sound reaches miles across the sea. Fishermen in the islands to the south report hearing it like thunder from the underworld. April 11th. A section of the outer wall collapses near the Lycus Valley. Ottoman infantry rush forward under shields, only to be met by stones, arrows, and boiling oil. When they retreat, the Byzantines and their allies repair the breach with sacks of sand, barrels, and broken statues of saints. The statues bleed dust as if the marble itself were alive. That night, the emperor orders every church to open its doors. Bells ring across the city, calling all who can walk. Inside Hagia Sophia, the candles flicker beneath the vast dome. Greeks, Latins, Armenians, even a few Italians stand shoulder to shoulder for the first time in centuries. The great schism is forgotten. Faith and fear have merged into one prayer. They chant the Kyrie eleison, Lord, have mercy, until the sound fills the vault like waves. Even the soldiers on the walls can hear it, carried by the wind. April 18th. The first general assault. Under cover of darkness, thousands of Bashi bazooks, irregular Ottoman troops, storm the land walls between the Carisius and Romanus gates. They shout the names of God and empire. Their torches paint the sky red. The defenders fight from above, hurling stones and Greek fire. The attack lasts all night. At dawn, the dead carpet the field. The city cheers, but the joy is short-lived. The cannon fire resumes before noon. April 20th. A moment of hope. On the horizon appear 3 Genoese ships and 1 Byzantine vessel, loaded with grain and soldiers, sent by allies from Chios. The city watches from the towers as the Ottoman fleet sails out to intercept. Over 100 galleys against 4. The sea churns for hours, arrows hissing, oars splintering. The wind shifts suddenly. The Christian ships, larger and taller, ram through the Ottoman line. Their crews hurl stones and flaming barrels onto the smaller vessels below. When night falls, the 4 ships reach the Golden Horn to the roar of the entire city. It is the last time help will ever come. Mehmed watches from his tent on the shore, his face expressionless, when one of his admirals, Baltaolu, kneels before him in apology. The Sultan strikes him across the face with a bowstring. "You fought the wind," he says coldly. "Next time, fight the world." 2 days later, he orders something unprecedented. The chain blocking the harbour must be bypassed. April 22nd. At dawn, the people of Constantinople wake to an impossible sight. 70 Ottoman ships sliding down the hills of Galata, moving over land on greased logs. The galleys glitter in the sun, sails unfurled like banners of conquest. By sunset, they re-enter the water inside the Golden Horn behind the Byzantine defences. Panic spreads through the city. The emperor climbs the walls and stares at the new fleet in silence. God sip's will, he whispers. So be it. From that moment, Constantinople is surrounded by both land and sea. April 25th, May 10th. The days blend together. Dust, blood, smoke, prayer. Mehmed's engineers build siege towers and rams. His miners dig tunnels beneath the walls. Inside the city, counterminers dig their own shafts, flooding the Ottoman passages with oil and fire. The war becomes a battle of echoes. Men fight in darkness, hearing each other's breath through the earth. At night, the Sultan studies his maps by lamplight. He eats little, sleeps less. His astrologers read omens. His generals debate, should they wait or strike? Mehmed listens and says only, we are not waiting for victory. We are becoming it. May 7th. The Sultan orders another full assault. This time, the Janissaries lead 10,000 of the empire's best, their armour black with oil. They attack near the gate of Carisius. The defenders fight back with crossbows, stones, and boiling tar. The clash lasts hours. Giustiniani is hit by shrapnel. A metal fragment pierces his side. He is carried back to his ship, pale and silent. His absence ripples through the line like a curse. The Byzantines hold, but barely. May 12th. In the Ottoman camp, a comet appears in the night sky, blazing red above the walls. The soldiers whisper that it is a sign of conquest. Inside the city, priests declare it the sword of the Archangel Michael. Each side claims heaven is watching. May 23rd. The great chain breaks. A storm tears through the harbour. Several Byzantine ships sink, dragging the chain's anchors loose. The Sultan's fleet moves closer to the sea walls. The defenders can no longer rest. By now the food is nearly gone. Bread is mixed with sawdust, water tastes of iron. Each evening the emperor rides through the streets, unarmed, speaking to his people. Hold fast, we fight for the memory of the world. Children kneel for blessings. Women throw flowers at his feet. No one says what they are all thinking, that the end is close. May 26th. Mehmed summons his council. His vizier Halil Pasha urges delay. The walls are strong, the people desperate. But the Sultan's eyes are fixed on the city-sit's domes glowing in the sunset. If we wait, he says, the world will forget why we came. He orders the final assault for the night of May 28th, 29. May 28th. All day the cannons roar. By dusk, the western sky burns red. The emperor orders a final procession through the streets. The relics of the true cross, the holy icon of the Virgin, and the crown of Constantine the Great are carried through the city for the last time. Men, women, and children kneel in the candlelight, chanting as the army of Islam prepares its prayers beyond the walls. In the camp, Mehmed walks between the tents. He tells his men, tomorrow, we dine in the city of Caesar. The soldiers answer with one voice, Allahu Akbar. From the ramparts, the Byzantines hear the echo and answer with bells. Night falls. The city glows with torchlight. Every church filled, every hand raised to heaven. Across the plain, the Ottoman camp burns like a sea of stars. Between them lies only silence, and the shadow where two faiths meet. Tomorrow one world will end, and another will begin. Night of May 28th, 1453. The city does not sleep. The bells of every church ring without pause, their sound carrying through the narrow streets like waves over stone, from the harbour to the land walls. Every torch is lit. The people walk by candlelight, whispering prayers and farewells. In Hagia Sophia, the great church, the entire city gathers for one last liturgy. Greek and Latin, noble and peasant, soldier and child, they stand together beneath the vast dome that has seen 1,000 years of empire. The gold mosaics shimmer in the candlelight, reflecting faces wet with tears. At the altar stands Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, not in purple robes but in armor, polished for the last time. His voice trembles only once, when he says, "Tonight we are one faith, one people. Tomorrow we stand before God." When the service ends, he moves through the crowd, bowing to priests and soldiers alike. Many kneel, not to a ruler, but to a man who has become history. Outside, the night smells of wax, salt, and smoke. The stars are clear, the moon a thin crescent above the dark plain. Across that plain, tens of thousands of Ottoman campfires burn like a second city. From the Sultan's pavilion comes the low hum of prayer, answered by the deep pulse of drums. Mehmed II, 21 years old, sits alone beneath a black banner embroidered with gold. Around him kneel the ulema and his generals. He prays in silence, then stands. Tomorrow, he says, we take what destiny promised. The world is waiting for a new dawn. When he leaves the tent, the soldiers rise and shout in unison, Allahu Akbar, the cry echoing across the plain until it reaches the walls themselves. Midnight. The wind changes. The torches along the ramparts flicker eastward, the sign the gunners have waited for. At 1 a.m., the first cannon fires. A flash, a roar, a shock that ripples through the stone. Then another. The entire horizon erupts in flame. The first wave. The irregular Bashi bazooks, tens of thousands strong, rush forward through smoke and mud. They shout, they climb, they die. The defenders fire from above, arrows, stones, pots of Greek fire that burst into white flame. The walls are slick with blood and oil. By dawn, the first attack breaks. Thousands lie dead in the moat. But the Sultan does not stop. He orders the second wave, the Anatolian troops, disciplined, silent, carrying scaling ladders and hooks. They advance beneath banners of green and gold, chanting verses from the Quran. Cannon fire covers their approach. Arrows fall like rain. For 3 hours the fighting rages hand to hand along the outer wall. The emperor rides from sector to sector, shouting encouragement. His horse is flecked with ash and blood. Near the gate of St. Romanus, a cannonball smashes into the tower, shaking the ground. Dust blinds everyone for a heartbeat. 4:30 a.m. The second wave withdraws. The defenders cheer, exhausted, their armor scorched, their hands blistered. But the emperor knows it is not victory, it is delay. From the plain below, the deep drums begin again, slow, steady, merciless. Then comes the third wave. The Janissaries, 10,000 elite soldiers in black. They move forward in silence, the earth trembling under their feet. Behind them rides Mehmed himself, his armor silver, his face calm. He carries no sword, only a baton, commanding, not fighting. As they reach the moat, the Sultan raises his hand. Now, he says, the sky ignites with cannon fire. At the gate of St. Romanus, the defenders barely hold the line. Giustiniani, their commander, is carried back to his ship, wounded and pale. His men falter. The emperor takes his place, sword in hand, shouting, "Romans, stand firm!" The fighting becomes chaos. Men fall from the walls into the moat below. Ladders splinter. Fire spreads along the parapets. A group of Ottoman soldiers discovers a small postern gate left unbarred. The Kirka Porter. They slip through, a handful at first, then hundreds. They raise the Ottoman crescent above the northern wall. Someone shouts, "They are inside." Panic ripples through the defenders. Constantine rides toward the breach, his sword drawn, his cloak torn. "The city is lost," he cries, "but I am still its emperor." Around 6 a.m., the sun breaks through the clouds. The smoke glows red, as if the sky itself were burning. The last emperor of Rome disappears into the melee near the gate of St. Romanus. Witnesses see him strike down 2 Janissaries before being overwhelmed. When the battle ends, no one can find his body, only a headless corpse in purple greaves. later recognized by his golden spurs. 6:30 a.m. The banners of the crescent rise above the walls. The city's bells fall silent. Only the sound of cannon and shouting remains. Mehmed enters the breach on horseback, surrounded by his guard. He looks up at the flag snapping in the wind. "Behold," he says quietly, "the city of Caesar." His vizier, Halil Pasha, bows. The Sultan does not smile. Inside the city, chaos erupts. For 3 days, as custom allows, the soldiers take their spoils, houses, markets, and lives. The air fills with smoke and screams. Yet, amid the storm, some show mercy. Janissaries guard the gates of monasteries. Others lead captives unharmed to the harbour. By afternoon, the Sultan rides through the Forum of Constantine past broken columns and bodies. His horse's hooves ring against the marble. He moves toward the sound of chanting toward Hagia Sophia. Inside the great church, thousands have taken refuge. Men, women, priests, children, all huddled beneath the dome. When they see the soldiers enter, many kneel, others clutch icons. The commander calls for silence. Moments later, Mehmed himself steps into the doorway. He removes his shoes, walks across the mosaic floor, and looks up at the dome glowing in the dusty light. "This place will stand," he says, "but it will stand for God." He orders one of his men to climb the pulpit and call the adhan, the Muslim call to prayer. The sound rises, mingling with the fading sobs of the crowd. The church that was the heart of Christendom becomes a mosque. Outside, the city smoulders. The wind carries ash over the sea, scattering it like dust over history. The streets are lined with silence now. Broken doors, fallen crosses, scattered coins. In the Sultan's camp, the great gun lies silent, its barrel cracked from overuse. On the western wall, the bodies of the slain lie among the stones that once protected them, and somewhere beneath that ruin, buried in dust and sunlight, rests the last emperor of Rome, his sword still in hand. May 29th, 1453, the day the world changed. The city of Constantine is no more. The age of empire has ended, and in its ashes another world begins to breathe. May 29th, 1453, the morning after the world ended. The air is still thick with smoke and salt. The sun rises pale, red through dust. From the Sea of Marmara to the hills of Galata, nothing moves except the wind and the crows. Constantinople has fallen. For the first time in 1,000 years, the double-headed eagle of Byzantium is gone. The crescent flies above the walls. The streets, once lined with marble and mosaics, now run dark with ash and blood. The Sultan's order has not yet been given. For 3 days, by the ancient law of conquest, the city belongs to the soldiers. You walk through the silence of ruin. The Forum of Constantine is choked with debris, broken columns, overturned carts, the smell of fire and flesh. In the Augusteum near Hagia Sophia, the last banners of the empire hang torn and blackened. Women cling to the steps of the church, their eyes empty. Priests lie among their icons. The sound of prayers has been replaced by the scrape of boots and the hiss of burning oil. The first day is fire. Smoke pours from the merchants' quarter, from the houses of Blachane, from the cisterns where refugees hid. Gold melts into the cobblestones. The Genoese warehouses by the harbour burn with the smell of spice and tar. Ottoman soldiers move through the streets, shouting, looting, calling to one another in Turkish, Arabic, Persian. Some laugh, some sing, some cry. Many have never seen a city like this. Streets paved with marble, fountains carved like palaces. They tear the copper from domes, the jewels from chalices, the silver from icons. They believe, as their fathers did, that victory is a gift to be touched, not remembered. In Hagia Sophia, the transformation begins. The soldiers who entered at dawn have cleared the nave. The mosaics of Christ and the saints are covered with cloth. The great cross is removed. The air smells of sweat and incense, of tears and dust. A muezzin climbs the pulpit and calls the adhan. the first Islamic prayer ever heard beneath this dome. His voice trembles as it rises. Allahu Akbar. The echo lingers longer than sound itself, filling every crack of marble, every breath left behind by centuries. Outside, the emperor's palace lies silent. His throne room is empty. His body has not yet been found. Only his sword is discovered, bent and blood-stained near the gate of St. Romanus. When the soldiers bring it to Mehmed, he orders it cleaned and placed in his tent. The world has many emperors, he says softly, but only one Rome. The second day is thunder. Rain falls over the smoking city, washing blood into the gutters. The Sultan enters through the Carisius gate, riding beneath a storm of ash. Behind him march his janissaries, their armour black and gleaming. The ground is slick, the air heavy with the stench of burned oil and wet stone. He rides in silence, past the bodies of men and horses, past churches and towers that once defined the skyline of Christendom. When he reaches the Forum of Constantine, he stops. The statue of the emperor still stands, headless, arm outstretched toward the east. The Sultan looks up, rain streaming down his face. So ends the old world, he says. He dismounts before Hagia Sophia. The doors, carved from cedar and bronze, are open. Inside, the candles are gone. Only grey light filters through the smoke. Mehmed removes his boots and steps barefoot across the mosaic floor. He kneels, touches the stone and recites the Shahada. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his messenger. Then he rises, and with his hand scatters a handful of earth over his head, a gesture of humility before God. The soldiers lower their weapons. The city belongs now not to them, but to him. He turns to his viziers. Let no harm come to those who surrender, he says. Let the churches stand. The markets reopen. The city will live again. By his order, the killing stops. The looting ceases under threat of death. The same men who burned now carry water. Who looted now bury the dead. The janissaries post guards at the gates. The new banners of the Sultanate rise over the towers of the great palace. That night the rain stops. The fires begin to die. In the harbour, ships drift like ghosts. The chain across the Golden Horn lies half-sunken, broken. The sea glows faintly with reflections of flame and moonlight. May 30, 1st, 1453. The third day dawns pale and cold. Smoke still clings to the sky, turning the sun to copper, but the city is quieter now. The sound of hammers replaces the roar of war. Men clear rubble from the streets. Others tend the wounded. For the first time in living memory, Constantinople wakes to a day without a Christian emperor, and without the sound of its own bells. In the square before Hagia Sophia, the Sultan's court gathers. Viziers, scholars, generals and imams stand together beneath the broken statues of old Rome. Mehmed sits upon a chair taken from the palace treasury, its legs gilded and cracked. The people of the city, Greeks, Armenians, Jews, are brought before him. He promises protection to those who remain, slavery only to those who resist. His words are calm, rehearsed, imperial. Then he calls for the patriarch's seat to be restored. A city without faith, he says, is a body without a soul. Let them keep theirs. He appoints Gennadios Scholarios, a Greek scholar and monk, as the new patriarch of the Orthodox Church under his rule. The gesture is political, merciful, and absolute. That afternoon, the Sultan climbs to the highest tower of the palace. The view stretches endless. The Bosphorus glittering with sunlight, the domes and ruins below, the smoke trailing west. He closes his eyes and listens. The faint murmur of the city, the gulls, the waves. This, he says to his vizier, is my capital, not Eden, not Bursa, Istanbul. Below, the soldiers chant the name softly, repeating it like a prayer. Istanbul, the city of Islam. The transformation begins. Workmen clear the streets, rebuild walls, refill cisterns. Engineers survey the harbours. Artisans from Bursa and Damascus are summoned. The great palace is renamed Topkapi, the Cannon Gate. But the old world lingers still. At night, the city smells of ash and rain. The people move quietly through the ruins, gathering what little is left. In the shadows, widows whisper the names of the dead. Priests walk among them, carrying small icons hidden beneath their cloaks. The mosaics of Hagia Sophia, Christ, the Virgin, the saints, glimmer faintly behind their veils of plaster. The angels still watch from the dome, half hidden but not erased. The city has changed gods, but not yet its soul. When the muezzin calls to prayer that evening, his voice echoes across the Bosphorus. In the fading light, the walls shine red, the sea gold, somewhere far off. A single bell rings from a monastery that has not yet been silenced. Its tone wavers, lost among the waves. 3 days have passed since the empire ended. The city breathes again, weakly, uncertainly, but alive. The old world sleeps beneath its stones. And above it, the new world begins to build. June 1453. The smoke has lifted, but the air still tastes of ashes. The sea reflects a sky of pure washed blue. The gulls return first, circling over the ruined harbours, crying like ghosts of sailors. Constantinople is quiet now, half dead and half reborn. Its towers are scorched, its streets broken, but the rhythm of life has begun again. The Ottoman banners no longer feel foreign. They ripple softly in the wind above the domes. From his new palace at Topkapi, overlooking the Bosphorus, Sultan Mehmed II begins to rule. He is 21 years old. The empire he inherited has doubled overnight, and its capital is a ruin. But he sees not ruins, he sees foundations. Each morning before sunrise, he climbs the terrace and watches the mist drift from the sea. He calls the city by a new name, Constantinia, the city of Constantine. His secretaries record it also as Istanbul, the city of Islam. But to the Greeks who remain, it is still simply the city. He says to his viziers, "This is not conquest, this is inheritance." June 1, 1453. Mehmed orders a census of the living. Barely 30,000 souls are found. He sends proclamations to the provinces. "Come to the city. Whoever settles here will be free of tax for 2 years." From Anatolia, Thrace, Macedonia, and Syria they come. Turks, Greeks, Jews, Armenians, Arabs, families of craftsmen and traders, sailors and scholars. Within months, Constantinople breathes again. The Sultan's vision is not only of empire but of order. He builds a council of advisors drawn from every corner of his dominion: viziers, judges, Christian architects, Persian engineers. He listens to them all, then decides alone. In late summer, work begins to clear the ruins. Janissaries dig trenches. Artisans from Bursa carve new stone. Greek masons, spared from slavery, rebuild the walls they once defended. Mehmed walks among them unarmed, speaking quietly. "You build for your children," he tells them, "not for me." His first great work is the rebuilding of Hagia Sophia. The mosaics are covered with white plaster, the marble floors polished, the dome reinforced with iron bands. At its base, 4 slender minarets rise into the sky like spears of light. When the first call to prayer echoes through the city, even his soldiers fall silent. The sound rolls across the hills and over the sea, a new rhythm for an ancient heart. But Mehmed is not a destroyer of memory. He visits the monasteries that remain, granting protection to the monks. He reopens the Greek Patriarchate, appointing Gennadios Scholarios as patriarch, and giving him a staff carved with silver serpents. "Rule your flock," the Sultan tells him, "as I rule mine. So long as they obey the law, their faith is their own." He creates a system the world has never seen before. A millet, a community of faiths under one crown. Christians will judge Christians, Jews will judge Jews, Muslims will judge Muslims. The empire will be made not of one people but of many, bound by loyalty instead of blood. Summer 1453. The city hums again. The markets reopen, fishermen mend their nets. The smell of bread returns to the air. In the Grand Bazaar, once a Byzantine square, traders from Persia, Arabia, and Venice haggle in a dozen languages. Goldsmiths shape new coins stamped with the Sultan's tugra, the imperial seal. The sound of hammers becomes the heartbeat of rebirth. Still, not all can forget. In the evenings, Greek widows gather near the ruined churches, lighting candles in the cracks of the walls. They whisper the names of husbands and sons. At night, when the wind shifts, the faint tolling of a hidden bell carries from the hills, a reminder that the old faith has not gone silent, only hidden. Mehmed rides often through the city on horseback, dressed simply, a hood over his head so few recognize him. He stops in the workshops, listens to the builders, eats with the labourers. One day a craftsman says to him, not knowing whom he speaks to, "This city will never love another master." The Sultan smiles. "Then I will not be her master," he says. "I will be her keeper." 1454. The reconstruction accelerates. New walls rise along the Golden Horn. The docks are cleared. The chain that once blocked the harbour is reforged as a symbol of strength, not fear. At the edge of the sea, Mehmed begins the construction of a great mosque, the Fatih Kami, the Conqueror's Mosque. It will stand on the ruins of the Church of the Holy Apostles where the emperors of Byzantium were once buried. He orders that their tombs be left untouched. "We build beside them," he says, "not over them." He also builds schools, hospitals, libraries, and kitchens for the poor. His dream is not a battlefield, but a city that teaches and feeds. "If I hold the capital," he tells his council, "the world will come to me." In Edirne, foreign envoys arrive, Venetians, Hungarians, Genoese, each seeking peace with the young conqueror. They bow before him in silence. He greets them not as a warrior, but as an emperor. "Tell your masters," he says, "that Rome has not fallen. It has moved east." He begins to call himself Kaiser I Rum, Caesar of Rome. The title shocks Europe. The Pope in Rome refuses to speak his name. But Mehmed believes what he says. In his eyes, the legacy of the Caesars, of Justinian and Constantine, has passed to him. He studies the works of Roman law, orders Latin texts translated into Turkish. He dreams of an empire stretching from the Danube to the Nile, from the Aegean to Persia. 1455. The transformation is complete. The ruined streets are now alive with merchants and scholars. The markets overflow with fabrics, glass, spices, manuscripts. The sounds of church bells, once banned, now mingle with the call to prayer. From the towers of Galata, the Genoese watch in wonder. A city they thought dead has become the centre of the world again. One evening, the Sultan returns to Hagia Sophia alone. The air is cool and still. The last light of day catches the gilded edges of the dome. He stands where the last emperor once prayed and whispers, "It is done." Then he closes his eyes and listens, not to victory but to silence. The silence of continuity, of history breathing again in a new tongue. Outside, the Bosphorus glows under the moon. The ships of the empire glide between continents, their sails white as wings. The stars above reflect in the water like 1,000 lanterns, old and new light together. A year ago, this city was ashes. Now it is the heart of an empire. Rome has been reborn in the east, and the young conqueror standing at his window knows what history will call him, Mehmed II. Mehmed the Conqueror, the man who ended one world and began another. Summer 1453. The news spreads like fire across the world. From the harbours of Chios and Rhodes, from Venetian galleys and Genoese traders, riders carry the same message west. Constantinople has fallen. In Venice, the bells of San Marco toll at dawn. Merchants abandon their counting houses. Senators gather in the Doge's palace, staring at maps of the Aegean. The Republic's envoys confirm it. Mehmed the Conqueror holds the city. The trade routes to the Black Sea, to Trebizond and Crimea, are lost. The Venetian Doge Francesco Foscari writes in disbelief, "We have seen the end of an empire older than our faith. The gateway of the world is closed." In Genoa, the reaction is quieter, more desperate. The Genoese of Galata, their colony opposite the Golden Horn, have survived by surrendering at once. Their ships lie anchored under Ottoman banners now. Many flee westward, carrying tales of horror and fire. They speak of the emperor who died sword in hand, of Hagia Sophia turned into a mosque, of women sold in the squares where senators once spoke Latin. From Rome, the newly elected Pope Nicholas V weeps when he receives the letter. He locks himself in his study for 3 days, refusing to eat. When he emerges, his face is pale, his voice thin. The world has lost its shield. The gates of Christendom are open. He calls for a new crusade, the last the papacy will ever attempt. Letters go out to France, England, the Holy Roman Empire, but the kings are weary. France is rebuilding after the 100 Years' War. England is sinking into its own civil strife. Germany is divided. Spain is busy purging its own faiths. No army marches. By autumn, the Crusaders become a rumour, and then a prayer. Across Europe, the people speak of prophecy. Monks in France write that the Antichrist has been born in the East. In Germany, preachers claim the apocalypse is near. In the North, scholars debate whether the fall of the Second Rome means that the Third must rise somewhere, perhaps in Moscow, perhaps in heaven. In the East, the smaller kingdoms tremble. The despotate of Morea, ruled by the emperor's brothers, surrenders within a decade. Trebizond, the last fragment of Byzantium, falls in 1461. The Ottoman tide rolls westward. Serbia, Bosnia, Albania, all swallowed by the empire that calls itself both crescent and crown. Yet from the ruins something unexpected begins. Among the refugees who escape Constantinople are scholars, men who carry nothing but manuscripts and memory. One of them, Bessarion, a Greek cardinal, arrives in Venice with trunks of books. Works of Plato, Aristotle, Euclid, Galen, texts thought lost for centuries. Others flee to Florence, to Naples, to Padua. They bring with them a language the West has almost forgotten, Greek. In their luggage are scrolls written by hands 1,000 years dead. The West, starved of knowledge after centuries of war and plague, opens those pages like a window. 1454. In Florence, the humanist Marsilio Ficino receives a copy of Plato's complete works, translated by refugees from Constantinople. In the candlelight of the Medici library, he begins to read. His letters describe it as revelation. We see again the world that was buried. Light returns to Europe from the ashes of the Greeks. From these manuscripts will grow the philosophy of the Renaissance, the belief that beauty and reason are divine, that man is not a shadow of sin, but a reflection of creation itself. The irony is cruel and perfect. While the ancient city of learning falls, its spirit awakens anew in the lands that watched it burn. In Venice, artists paint angels with the faces of refugees. In Florence, engineers sketch domes modelled after Hagia Sophia. In Rome, the Pope commissions architects to build a church that will rival the one now lost to Islam. The Basilica of St. Peter's will rise from this grief. Meanwhile, in Istanbul, Mehmed II surrounds himself with scholars and translators. He collects manuscripts in Arabic, Greek, and Latin, building a library greater than any in Europe. He invites Italian artists to his court, painters from Venice, builders from Florence. He studies maps of the world, listens to astronomers, and orders translations of Roman law. The conqueror of Constantinople dreams of uniting worlds through knowledge. A Venetian ambassador writes home. He is young, curious, terrible, and wise. He believes himself chosen by both God and fortune, and he might be right. 1455. In a workshop in Mainz, a German printer named Johannes Gutenberg completes the first printed Bible. For the first time in history, books can be made faster than they can be burned. The press spreads through Europe like wildfire. Within 50 years, thousands of books will fill the world with new voices: Greek, Latin, and now Turkish. The fall of one city has made all knowledge urgent. If an empire can vanish, so can truth, and so men begin to write, to copy, to print, not to preserve faith, but to preserve memory. 1456. In Rome, an aged monk named Aeneas Silvius Piccolomini, once a diplomat to the Byzantines, writes in his journal, "I walked once beneath the dome of Hagia Sophia. I saw light fall as if from heaven. Now I wonder, perhaps God moved that light to another land." 2 years later, he becomes Pope Pius II and still dreams of a crusade, but he dies before it can begin. In Moscow, a prince named Ivan III begins to style himself as Tsar, claiming descent from the emperors of Constantinople through his marriage to Sophia Palaiologina, the niece of the last Byzantine ruler. He declares that Moscow is the third Rome, and that no other will come after. The idea will outlive him by centuries. Everywhere the world adjusts its balance. The centre has shifted eastward. The Ottoman Empire becomes the bridge between continents, faiths, and centuries. Europe tightens its borders, builds new walls of wood and sail. Explorers begin to dream of routes that bypass the Turkish straits, southward around Africa, westward across the unknown sea. By trying to avoid the empire of Mehmed, they will find the Americas. In Istanbul, the Sultan stands once more upon the walls of the city he has remade. It is 1457. The air smells of lime and new stone. Below him, ships move through the Bosphorus like veins of silver. He listens to the sound of hammers and prayers, both Muslim and Christian. His dream is complete, not destruction but permanence. He turns to his tutor, Akshemseddin, and says, "The world thought I ended Rome, but I have made it eternal." The old man nods. "Every empire believes that," he says. Mehmed smiles. "Perhaps, but only one will be right." Far away in Venice, a Greek refugee writes by candlelight. He records the date, the names, the fall, then he pauses and dips his pen again. "The city has fallen," he writes, "but her spirit walks in every tongue that remembers her." Outside, the sea is calm. The waves carry the echoes of two songs, one sung to the cross, the other to the crescent, mingling forever in the same wind. 1460. 7 years have passed since the fall of Constantinople. The city, once ashes, now breathes with life. Markets hum, mosques gleam, domes echo with prayer and trade. And at its centre stands a man still young, yet already weary of triumph. Mehmed II, Sultan of the Ottomans, Kaiser-i-Rum, the Caesar of Rome. He rules an empire that stretches from the Danube to the Taurus Mountains, from the Black Sea to the Aegean. From his palace of Topkapi, built upon the ruins of the Byzantine Acropolis, he governs through order and silence. His word is law, his will a compass. He wakes before dawn, prays alone, and then begins his ritual of governance, reading reports, judging petitions, signing decrees. In his chambers hangs a map of the world, the Mediterranean at its heart, the oceans unknown beyond its edges. He studies it the way other men study the stars. He is no longer only the conqueror, he has become the architect. 1461. Mehmed leads his army east to the Black Sea coast. The last remnant of the Byzantine world still survives there, the Empire of Trebizond, ruled by the Komnenoi. The city surrenders without a siege. The Sultan rides through its gates in silence, refusing plunder, and declares, "Rome must be whole." When he returns to Istanbul, he brings with him manuscripts, gold, and scholars. He summons architects from Persia, Egypt, and the Balkans. He orders the construction of new mosques, bridges, aqueducts, and gardens. Under his reign, the skyline of Istanbul changes again. Domes of stone and lead bloom above the hills, the call to prayer mingling with the hum of the sea. He commands that Greek, Arabic, and Persian be taught in the schools of the capital. He founds madrasas, colleges for theology and law, but also for mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. He funds a workshop for translators who render Aristotle, Plato, Ptolemy, and Galen into Turkish. To know the world, he says, is to rule it. At night, when the palace grows quiet, he walks through the courtyards with his tutor Akhemseddin, now an old man. They talk of science and fate. "Will your empire last?" the scholar asks. Mehmed smiles faintly. "If Rome still lives, why not mine?" 1463. War returns. The Republic of Venice, fearful of Ottoman power, allies with Hungary and launches a campaign along the Adriatic. For 10 years, the struggle ebbs and flows, raids, sieges, truces, betrayals. Venetian fleets clash with Ottoman galleys off the coasts of Albania and Greece. The Sultan responds with a new invention: cannon-armed ships, floating fortresses that spit fire at close range. The war drains gold and blood, but Mehmed does not tire. He studies fortifications, sketches siege engines with his engineers, even debates artillery range with his gunners. His interest in technology borders on obsession. Fire, he says, is the language of the New World. By 1470, Venice sues for peace. The Ottoman banner now flies over Euboea and the islands of the Aegean. In these years, the Sultan Sep's reputation changes. To his people, he is Fatih, the conqueror. To his enemies, he is the thunder of the East. To historians, he becomes something stranger, a ruler of contradictions, a man who quotes Aristotle in the morning and orders an execution before noon. He is ruthless, but not cruel, curious yet intolerant of failure. He values knowledge more than flattery, loyalty more than blood. He keeps spies even among his viziers and sleeps behind 3 locked doors. He trusts no one completely, not even his sons. Within the palace, silence reigns. The courtiers speak in whispers, for the Sultan's moods shift like the sea. Sometimes he emerges radiant, distributing gold to poets and builders. Sometimes he walks the halls alone, muttering to himself about destiny. 1473. A new threat rises from the east. The white sheep Turkomans, led by Uzun Hasan. They call themselves the heirs of Persia and challenge Mehmed's dominion. The Sultan marches east with an army of 100,000 men. The two forces meet near Otluk Belli, in the mountains of Anatolia. The battle lasts a single day. Ottoman cannons roar through the valleys, scattering cavalry and armour. By nightfall, Uzun Hasan flees. His empire collapses. Mehmed rides through the smoke, his horse streaked with mud and blood. He looks at the corpses and murmurs, "The world has no end. Only men do." When he returns to Istanbul, he orders celebrations to last 3 days, but he does not attend. Instead, he studies maps, tracing rivers with his finger, the Danube, the Tigris, the Nile. He dreams of taking Rome itself, completing the prophecy of Alexander and Caesar. 1475. 1480. The Sultan Sep's attention turns to the sea again. He builds a fleet of 300 ships, the largest the empire has yet seen. He sends them westward to Italy. In 1480, Ottoman forces land in southern Italy and seize the town of Otranto. For the first time, the crescent flies on Italian soil. Panic spreads through Europe. Rome fears invasion. The Pope orders the bells of St. Peter's rung day and night. But fate intervenes. Within a year, disease ravages the Ottoman garrison. The Sultan recalls his army to prepare a greater campaign, a march that will take him to the eternal city itself. He believes it is destiny. As Constantine took Byzantium, he says, "So shall I take Rome." 1481. Spring. The palace gardens are in bloom. heavy with roses and jasmine. The Sultan wakes before dawn, as always. He writes letters to his commanders, gives orders for ships, speaks briefly with his sons, then he mounts his horse and rides toward the western frontier. But on the way, near the town of Gebze, he grows ill. The army stops. Tents rise. Physicians hurry to his side. Greeks, Persians, Arabs, each bringing their own cures. None succeed. The once restless conqueror now lies still, his breath thin as paper. He asks for his tutor, Seddin, but the old man has died years before. In his final hours he asks to see a map. They bring it to him, a parchment of the Mediterranean, inked with borders and islands. His fingers trace from Istanbul to Rome. He smiles faintly. There, he whispers, the world waits. At sunset, on May 3rd, 1481, Sultan Mehmed II dies in his tent. He is 49 years old. When the news reaches the capital, the city falls silent. The cannon that once broke the Theodosian Walls fires one last salute over the Bosphorus. The people gather in the courtyards of Hagia Sophia, now the great mosque, and pray. Some weep openly, others whisper, "He conquered the world, but not time." His body is carried back to Istanbul, under a sky heavy with rain. He is buried beside his mosque, the Fatih Cami, beneath a simple marble dome. On his tomb are inscribed the words he chose himself. He who took Constantinople and restored the world. For weeks after his death, the city moves in a strange hush. The markets reopen, the ships sail, but everyone speaks softly, as if afraid to wake a sleeping giant. In the palace, his son Bayezid II takes the throne. The empire remains strong, but the fire that forged it has dimmed. And yet Mehmed VI's legacy endures. He leaves not only conquest, but identity. A capital reborn, a bridge between continents, a promise that knowledge can live beside faith. In the libraries he built, scholars copy manuscripts in Arabic, Persian, Greek, and Latin. In his mosques, poets recite verses to the rhythm of the sea. In his city, the call to prayer and the bell of a monastery sometimes ring together, one high, one low, like two halves of a heartbeat. The world remembers him by many names: tyrant, hero, visionary, destroyer, but history calls him what he truly was, the hinge on which the old world closed, and the new one began to turn. And somewhere beneath the streets of Istanbul, beneath the marble and dust, the earth still holds the echo of his footsteps, the man who made empires mortal and cities eternal. If you enjoy these journeys, a like and a subscription mean more than you think. They directly keep this channel alive. 1453. When Constantinople fell, the night that covered Europe seemed endless. But from that darkness light began to move, slowly, almost unseen at first, like dawn behind a mountain. No one called it a renaissance yet. It was simply a longing that could not be buried, a hunger for truth, for art, for beauty, for meaning beyond survival. The fall of the Queen of Cities did not end civilization. It scattered it. Scholars, artists, monks, and exiles carried the fragments across the sea like embers in their hands. From those embers, Europe began to burn again, not with fire, but with thought. Florence, 1454. In the library of Cosimo de' Medici, sunlight filters through the tall windows, falling on piles of parchment and ink. A young man named Marsilio Ficino bends over a Greek manuscript brought from Constantinople by a refugee monk. It is the complete works of Plato, unseen in the West for nearly 1,000 years. He writes in his diary that night, "When I read these words, I feel the soul awaken. The ancients speak again, and in their speech I hear God Sip's voice in man. The words of Greece, once sealed behind Byzantine walls, have found new life in Italy. With them come ideas forgotten since Rome's first fall, geometry as divine order, beauty as proof of creation, knowledge as worship." Ficino translates Plato into Latin, Pico della Mirandola. studies Aristotle and the Kabbalah. In Florence, artists begin to paint not just saints and martyrs, but the human body as miracle, Brunelleschi's domes, Donatello's bronze David, Botticelli's faces touched with light. The church frowns but cannot stop it. The soul of man has become its own cathedral. Venice, 1460. The ports hum with languages: Greek, Turkish, Latin, Hebrew. Merchants trade silk and sugar, but also ideas. The refugees from Byzantium teach philosophy in the universities of Padua and Bologna. One of them, Cardinal Bessarion, donates his collection of Greek manuscripts to the city, creating what will become the Marciana Library, the first great humanist library of the modern world. He writes in his dedication, "Books are the true walls of a city. When they fall, so does memory. Let this place be our new Constantinople." From Venice, the revival spreads like tidewater to Milan, to Ferrara, to Rome. Mainz, 1455. A man named Johannes Gutenberg sets the first pages of the Latin Bible into movable type. Until now, every book had been copied by hand. Months of work for a single volume. Now the press breathes out pages like rain. Within decades, printers appear in every major city. They publish Bibles, histories, calendars, but soon also the works of Cicero, Virgil, and Plato. Ideas once buried in monasteries now travel faster than armies. Europe begins to remember itself. Rome, 1471. The city that once ruled the world lies in ruins, its marble stolen, its aqueducts dry. But the popes have learned from the fall of the East. They begin to rebuild, not as emperors, but as patrons of art and learning. Nicholas V restores the Vatican Library, filling it with Greek and Latin manuscripts. His successor, Sixtus VI, commissions new churches and invites artists from across Italy. Leon Battista Alberti designs facades that echo the geometry of ancient temples. The Vatican becomes not only the seat of faith, but the workshop of civilization. Under its dome, painters climb scaffolds, mixing pigments of lapis and gold. Architects speak of symmetry and perspective, the invisible mathematics of divinity. Faith itself begins to look like reason dressed in colour. 1475. In Florence, a boy named Leonardo da Vinci apprentices in the workshop of Verrocchio. He sketches gears and birds, hands and rivers, eyes and stars. When he hears of the Turkish cannons that broke the walls of Constantinople, he draws his own, sleeker, balanced, imagined as machines of both beauty and power. In his notebooks he writes, "Those who see only destruction have not looked closely enough. The force that ruins can also create." For Leonardo and his generation, art and science are no longer enemies. They are two wings of the same bird, the flight of human curiosity. 1478, 1480. Across Europe, the old certainties begin to crumble. Philosophers question not only the shape of the world, but the place of man within it. Astronomers reading Greek texts newly recovered from Byzantium rediscover Ptolemy and soon begin to doubt him. In a university in Krakow, a student named Nicolaus Copernicus studies these texts. He copies passages about the movement of planets, the geometry of spheres. He begins to wonder whether the Earth is not the centre at all. He will not publish his theory for 70 years, but its seed is planted here, in the ashes of a fallen empire. Spain, 1492. Another chapter closes. The last Muslim stronghold of Granada falls to Ferdinand and Isabella. That same year, a Genoese sailor named Christopher Columbus, carrying a map based on Ptolemy and Greek speculation, sails west to find a route around the empire of the Turks. Instead, he finds a new world. The shock of discovery breaks the last walls of the Middle Ages. Europe's horizon, once guarded by Constantinople, now stretches beyond oceans. The compass, the press, and the rediscovered mind of Greece form a trinity that remakes reality. 1485, 1500. In the workshops of Italy, the air smells of oil and pigment. Painters mix gold dust into tempera, sculptors carve flesh from marble, printers set Greek type for the first time, physicians dissect the body without fear. The Renaissance is not born of comfort, it is born of loss. It is the realization that even empires die, but the idea of humanity does not. A monk in Florence writes, "We were sleeping in darkness. God burned down our house so we would see the stars." By 1500, less than half a century after the fall of Constantinople, the world has changed beyond recognition. Maps double in size. Cathedrals rise higher, not as fortresses but as light. Men speak of proportion, harmony, and dignity. Music shifts from chant to melody. Philosophy becomes a mirror for the soul, not a chain for the mind. The last generation to remember Byzantium is dying, but in their students, in their art, their geometry, their faith transformed by reason, the empire's spirit endures. In Venice, old Bessarion stands on the balcony of his library, watching the sun sink into the sea. He whispers to his apprentice, "They said the city fell, but look, it walks here in light, in language, in the turning of the world, and as the bells of San Marco ring in the dusk, their sound mingles with the sea, the same sound that once echoed from the towers of Constantinople. The world has begun again. Not by sword, but by thought. Not in marble, but in mind. The dark ages are over, and in their place, the light of man has returned." 1500. A century has turned since the drums of the Ottomans echoed across the Golden Horn. The children born after the fall of Constantinople are now old. They live in a world that would have been unrecognizable to their fathers. The age of empires built on stone has ended. The new empires are made of paper, ink, and wind. The printing press hums across Europe, its gears and type spreading words faster than swords ever could. In Florence, Rome, Paris, and Mainz, books multiply like seeds. Knowledge is no longer a secret, nor the privilege of kings. It becomes common, dangerous, alive. The compass, once a curiosity of Arab sailors, now points to infinite horizons. The world's edge, long drawn in fear and imagination, begins to recede. The astrolabe and the star charts of the Greeks, rescued from the ashes of Byzantium, guide new hands across oceans. And the men who once prayed to reach Jerusalem now sail toward the sunset, searching not for heaven but for land. 1492. A Genoese mariner, Christopher Columbus, crosses the Atlantic. He carries with him a Bible, a compass, and the legacy of Greek geometry copied by Muslim astronomers. When he finds land, he believes he has reached the edge of Asia, the other side of Mehmed's empire. Instead, he finds the beginning of another world. His voyage opens the floodgates of discovery and destruction. Within a generation, maps must be redrawn. Within a century, faith itself must learn to share the sky. 1500, 1510. In the workshops of Venice, shipwrights hammer new caravels with hulls of oak and sails of linen. In the courts of Portugal, cartographers trace Africa's coast and whisper of India. In Seville, gold from new continents begins to flow into Europe's hands. The balance of the world shifts westward. For 1,000 years, Constantinople had been the axis of civilization, the hinge between Christendom and Islam, between the Mediterranean and the Silk Road. Now the seas themselves have become the new road. Merchants who once crossed Anatolia now cross the Atlantic. The Silk Road falls silent, its caravans replaced by fleets. And far to the east, the city once called Queen of Cities stands quiet, watching a new age pass her by. In Istanbul, the descendants of Mehmed II continue to rule. The city thrives, its mosques and markets filled with life. But even here, change arrives on the wind. Strange instruments arrive from Italy. Lenses, clocks, compasses. Books printed in foreign tongues begin to circulate. Scholars in the Sultan's court debate whether the earth moves around the sun. They speak in whispers. Such questions are still dangerous. But the whisper has begun. 1517. In Germany, a monk named Martin Luther nails his arguments to a church door in Wittenberg. His words, 45 years after the fall of Constantinople, crack Christendom in two. The age of faith gives way to the age of conscience. The printing press, born of that same catastrophe, becomes the hammer that drives the nails. Europe fractures again, but differently this time, not by sword, but by scripture. The war between heaven and earth moves from walls to words. 1520. In Rome, Michelangelo paints the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, his figures vast and human, their beauty equal to any god's. The dome that shelters them is inspired by Hagia Sophia, the geometry of the East reborn in the heart of the West. The colours blaze like fire, Adam reaching for God, creation itself shaped by human hands. The Renaissance has become a mirror where man sees himself divine. It is no longer a whisper of recovery, it is a roar of rebirth. 1530, 1550. The age of discovery becomes an age of empire. Spain, Portugal, England, and France carve the world into quarters. Gold and grief cross the oceans together. The same maps that once promised wonder now carry plague and conquest. For every palace built, a civilization falls. For every voyage celebrated, a silence deepens. And through it all, the memory of Constantinople lingers, no longer as a city but as a question. Can any power, any idea, any faith last forever? In Istanbul, the Ottoman Empire reaches its height under Suleiman the Magnificent, the grandson of Mehmed II. His ships rule the Mediterranean. His armies reach the gates of Vienna. He commissions poets and architects, philosophers and astronomers. His architect, Mimar Sinan, builds mosques whose domes seem to float on light, each one a descendant of Hagia Sophia. The lineage of beauty continues, unbroken by war. But even as the empire flourishes, the old certainty fades. Trade shifts to the Atlantic. The Mediterranean becomes a sea of memory. The centre of the world has moved, quietly, irrevocably beyond the horizon. 1600. 150 years after the fall, the world no longer calls itself medieval. The age of reason has begun. The stars are measured, the body dissected, the heavens challenged. The telescope of Galileo turns toward the sky that once belonged only to God. He looks and finds motion. The church will call it heresy. The world will call it truth. Either way, the heavens are no longer fixed. And with that revelation, the last wall of the old world falls, not of stone, but of certainty. You stand now at the edge of history's long night. Behind you lie the ruins of empires, Rome, Byzantium, and all the kingdoms that dreamed they would never die. Before you spreads the sea, open, infinite, uncharted. The bells of the old world have gone quiet. In their place, the wind hums with a new sound, the hum of sails, the scratch of pen on parchment, the pulse of printing presses, the rhythm of discovery, the music of doubt, the heartbeat of modernity. Far away in the quiet of Istanbul, an old scholar walks the courtyard of Hagia Sophia at dusk. The muezzin's call echoes through the domes, blending with the rustle of pigeons and the whisper of the sea. He pauses, listening. He has heard this sound his entire life. And yet, tonight, it feels different, softer, as if the centuries themselves are exhaling. He looks up at the fading sky and thinks of what was lost and what was found. The city still stands. The world has changed. Perhaps that is the only kind of eternity there ever was. He closes his eyes. The wind moves through the arches, through marble and shadow, through time itself. The old world is gone. The new one breathes in its place. And the sound of both, the prayer and the silence that follows, becomes history's final chord. The story is over now. The cannons are silent. The banners are folded. The sea has swallowed the noise of empire. You breathe slowly, letting the centuries fall away. The fires have cooled. The marble has turned to dust. The names have faded from the stones. The world that once seemed endless has become memory, soft, distant, safe. Somewhere, beneath the moonlight, the domes of Hagia Sophia still rise. The call to prayer drifts through the air, gentle as a heartbeat. You can almost hear it blending with the echo of forgotten bells, as if the two songs have never truly been apart. The streets are empty now. The wind moves through them like a tide. You walk once more through that city of ghosts, past the broken columns, the gardens reborn, the scent of salt and rain. Every footstep feels lighter than the last, as if time itself were forgiving. The empire that dreamed of eternity has become what it always was, a whisper between ages, a breath between dawns. And yet in that whisper, everything lives. The builders, the scholars, the conquerors, the dreamers. Their hands built the walls of our world. Their dreams built its light. You are part of it too now. Every breath you take carries the dust of Constantinople, the ink of Florence, the wind of unknown seas. Every heartbeat is an echo of 1,000 others, beating in stone and parchment and memory. Let it all fade now. Let the sound of the sea carry you farther, past the towers and the stars, past history itself. There is no more battle, no more empire, no more fear, only the quiet rhythm of the world turning, endlessly, gently toward morning. You sit, safe now. The story is at rest. The old world sleeps behind you. The new one waits with open hands. Breathe in, breathe out, and let it all go. Sweet dreams.